I'm about to show you all of the big, scary, intimidating books on my TBR. I have a stack of like 10 or 11 books here, and it's so tall. They're so fat. And they're scary. So I want to share those with you. I want you to tell me if you've read them, if you love them. Give me that little boost I need to make myself pick it up. Because right now I look at these books and I'm like, when? How will I ever make the move on that book? They're too big. But let's go ahead and jump right in. The first one is the only one that's a sequel on this stack. Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. Book 2 in the Stormlight Archives. Look at that. 1,200 pages. Now, I've heard a lot of people when they talk about the Stormlight Archives talk about they're just so good and so page turning that it's very easy to read these books, even though they're massive. That is not my experience. I do enjoy Brandon Sanderson. I did like book 1, The Way of Kings, but it took me work to get through. It took me a while. It took me conscious effort to keep picking up that giant tome, and this one's longer. So this is an absolutely epic fantasy world, fantasy series, planned to be 10 books. We've got 5 out so far, and they're all massive. I like the first book. I gave it 4 stars. Shocking, I know, everyone gives it 5. I give it 4. I thought it was pretty good. But is it worth all of this time? Oh, it's so hard to pick up. I think I will pick it up. I do want to continue this. I do want to like be caught up in the Cosmere. What a dream. But please tell me, is this better than book 1? Is it worth reading 1,200 pages? We'll see. Next up is the most recent fat book I've added to my TBR. If you're interested in what else I added to my TBR, I'll link the video down below. But this is The Stand by Stephen King. It's so big. This one is 1,150 pages. This is a post-apocalyptic virus broken out across the world survival story. It's really large. I really want to get to it this year because there is an anthology by a bunch of authors that I love who wrote short stories set in the world of The Stand, which is so cool, something I've never seen before, and I absolutely want to be able to enjoy that. But that means I have to read this first. So, I've heard it's great. Obviously, I've heard wonderful things about it. I just don't know, like, I have read a longer Stephen King. I've read Needful Things by Stephen King, which I think was like 700 pages, and I did enjoy it, but that was like set in the real world with a little magic pawn shop. This is like post-apocalyptic. It might be scary. We'll see. Next up, I have Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, winner of the Pulitzer Prize. This is a biggin'. Not only is it large, but it's older and it's a Western, which may make you wonder why is it on my TBR. I've just heard, okay, this is from 1985. I've heard that this is one of the best books ever in existence, and that if you were to read a Western, it should be this one, and that even if you don't want to read a Western, you should read this one. So I'm just so intrigued. I just want to know, but do I want to know this badly? This is almost 900 pages, but there's a lot of words crammed in per page. And I feel like I'll totally read it one day, but when? Next one may be one you haven't heard of before. This is Sycorax's Daughters, which I've never heard of before besides me seeing it on my own shelf. This is over 500 pages. This is an anthology of scary stories by a bunch of smart people. I think these are all written by Black authors. They are mostly authors that I've never read from before, which is also what makes it intimidating because I really like reading an anthology that has like a couple people I already know and love, and then I'm introduced to more. But this is like I'm introduced to all these new people. They're dark, scary stories, and I'm also intimidated by how dark and scary does it get? Because I don't want to be terrified. I'd prefer not to be traumatized, but I just like a little bit of scary. And I've heard nothing about this book ever to know, like, what vein of scary is this? But I'm excited. Maybe one Halloween, maybe this Halloween, I could pick it up, at least try it out. And then you can't make a list of books that you're most intimidated by without including classics. One, I've barely read classics ever anyways, but then to look at a massive classic is all the more scary. So this one's actually less than 500 pages, but again, there's a lot of words on the page. This is Crime and Punishment, and I don't even know how to say the author's name, and that's intimidating as well. Now, the reason I have this is because I absolutely love a revenge story, and I know this is one of like the ultimate revenge stories, which is why I want to read it, but is it beginner friendly if you haven't read a lot of older works? I'm not sure. But I feel like I'm gonna love it for some reason. I guess just based on the fact that I like revenge, but I hope to love it. I hope to read it. Speaking of revenge stories, I have The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is a high fantasy novel that has dragons and war. And I've heard from so many people that this is a page turner. It sucks you in, you fly right through it. This one is over 500 pages and it just looks big. But I've actually attempted to read this book twice before. I've started it, read the beginning, and then just put it down. I was following what was happening. I don't know, I wasn't getting as into it as I needed to be to keep turning the page. So this one's intimidating because I've tried it multiple times and couldn't get into it, but I really want to read it. It's about revenge and I love revenge, so why can't I read it? I don't know. It has a cool magic system, things I've never read before, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh, next we have a book that I think it's the only book outside of School Days that I've lied and said that I read. Einstein by Walter Isaacson. I was asked by, I won't say who, but somebody asked me when they saw it on my shelf, did you actually read that? But they said it in such a smug way that I said, yeah, I have read it. How dare you question that I haven't read this big nonfiction book? And I haven't. It's over 600 pages. It's about the life of Einstein. I actually have read the first 100 pages or so. I was enjoying myself, but then we started getting into like Einstein's theories and equations that he made, and I was like, ooh, I don't feel like picking that up today. And I picked up multiple of these massive biographies by Walter Isaacson that, again, I feel like I'll like them, but I haven't read them yet. But I said I read this one. And that makes me want to read it even more, so like it will no longer be a lie. Well, it'll still be a lie, but it will no longer be true. Next up, I have one more classic on the list, and that is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. This is another book that I feel like I'll love. I've heard wonderful things about, but will I be able to enjoy a book that was written 200 years ago? I don't know. And it's quite the commitment to find out. So classics, of course, can be intimidating because of the language used and the style of writing. And I just haven't read enough like accessible classics to like kick it up a notch and go for The Three Musketeers. But I've also heard that it's easy to read. I just don't know. Is it? And you're probably thinking, why don't you just try reading it and see if it's easy to read? I do think I've started this before. I maybe only made it through 10 pages and didn't have a clue what was happening. So that's that. Next, I have another nonfiction. This one is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, which is over 500 pages long, and I'm intrigued about it because I just enjoy psychology. I like to know the science like in business and like the psychology behind decision making. Like that sounds like a good time, but it's really big. And I'm like, is it that much of a good time that I need to read this giant tome on it, or should I like listen to a couple podcasts about it? But I feel like this is a lot of research and a lot of like in-depth examples and studies that I would enjoy it. So this is definitely one that I hope to pick up. And then the last book that I have is a historical fiction fantasy, Ordinary Monsters by J.M. Miro. This is set in 1880 Victorian London, and we're following an orphan boy who like can magically heal himself, and a detective woman who like comes to escort him to safety, and this ends up traveling all over the world. Seems like a magical good time. This one is purely size that's intimidating me. I've heard good things about it. And I feel like if this were 350 pages with the exact same cover, exact same description, I would have picked it up by now, or at least wouldn't be intimidated by it. So this one is like purely the size of it. It's such a commitment to read a 650 page book that could end up being like 2 stars, could end up being 3 stars. Like, what a waste of time if you don't actually love a book that's so big and you then spend a month reading it. Like, if I spent a month reading a book, I need it to be the best book ever. Those are the books. Please tell me your experience with these books. Let me know if some of these like are inaccessible, or if you've read them and they're actually just long good books. Have you read The Stand? Have you read Lonesome Dove? Let me know which of these you would recommend to pick up and stop being scared of. But for now, these big boys are just gonna go back on the shelf. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon. Goodbye.